In the year 2347, Earth was a shadow of its former self. The planet's skies were perpetually gray, choked with the remnants of centuries of industrial waste. Rivers ran dry, forests were nothing more than memories, and the oceans had turned acidic. Humanity clung to survival, scraping by on what little resources remained. But the real threat wasn't the dying planet. It was the alien civilizations that surrounded them. For decades, humans had tried to coexist peacefully with these extraterrestrial powers, but tensions had reached a breaking point. The Zorathian Empire loomed largest among these threats, a vast coalition of star systems ruled by an enigmatic emperor named Kael Vorn. The Zorathians viewed humanity as weak and expendable. Their technology far surpassed anything Earth could produce, and their armies were vast. Rumors spread among human leaders that the Zorathians were planning something catastrophic, though no one knew exactly what it was. Desperate for answers, Earth's government decided to take a drastic step. They would send a spy into the heart of the Empire. Lena Carter was not the kind of person you'd expect to undertake such a mission. She was small in stature, with plain, brown hair and eyes that seemed too tired for someone her age. But appearances could be deceiving. Lena had spent years working as an intelligence officer, gathering information in some of the most dangerous corners of the galaxy. Her superiors knew she was smart, resourceful, and capable of blending into almost any environment. When the call came for someone to infiltrate the Galactic Court, Lena didn't hesitate to volunteer. The preparation process was grueling. Lena spent months learning everything she could about the Zorathians, their language, their customs, even the way they walked and spoke. She practiced speaking their tongue until her accent was indistinguishable from a native's. She studied their history, memorizing the names of their leaders and the intricate details of their political system. Physical alterations were necessary too. Doctors reshaped her nose and cheekbones slightly to make her features less distinctly human. By the time she was ready, even Lena barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her cover story was simple. She would pose as a servant, one of the countless workers who kept the imperial palace running smoothly. Servants were invisible, ignored by everyone except when needed. It was the perfect position for a spy. Lena boarded a smuggler's ship bound for the Zorathian homeworld, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She told herself, over and over, that this mission was bigger than her fears, bigger than her doubts. If she succeeded, she might save billions of lives. The journey took weeks, during which Lena barely slept. Every creak of the ship's hull made her jump. Every shadow in the cargo hold made her wonder if she'd been discovered. The smugglers who transported her were rough men, hardened by years of living on the fringes of society. They didn't ask questions, which suited Lena just fine. She kept to herself, rehearsing her cover story in her head and trying to ignore the gnawing worry in her stomach. When the ship finally landed on the Zorathian homeworld, Lena felt a wave of awe mixed with dread. The imperial palace rose before her like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Towering spires of gold and silver stretched toward twin suns that bathed the landscape in an eerie orange glow. Intricate mosaics covered every surface, depicting scenes of conquest and glory. Guards patrolled the grounds, their armor gleaming under the sunlight. Lena swallowed hard and reminded herself why she was here. She was taken to a processing center, where new servants were registered and assigned duties. The room buzzed with activity, filled with people from all over the Empire. Lena kept her head down, careful not to draw attention to herself. When her turn came, she handed over her forged identification papers and answered the clerk's questions in fluent Zorathian. The clerk gave her a quick once-over and stamped her documents without a second glance. Lena exhaled silently, relieved that her disguise had held up. Her first assignment was to clean the royal chambers. It was tedious work, scrubbing floors, and polishing furniture while trying to avoid the gaze of passing nobles. But Lena knew better than to complain. She observed everything, taking mental notes of the palace's layout and the habits of those around her. She noticed how the emperor rarely attended council meetings in person, preferring to let his advisors argue amongst themselves. She saw the tension between different factions within the court, each vying for power and influence. And she couldn't, help but notice the strange energy pulses that emanated from a locked chamber deep within the palace every night. Despite her efforts to remain inconspicuous, Lena soon attracted the attention of Daniel Cross, a young diplomat who frequently visited the palace. He was tall and lean with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. At first, Lena assumed he suspected her of being a spy and did her best to avoid him, but Daniel didn't act like someone who was suspicious. Instead, he struck up conversations with her whenever their paths crossed, asking about her background and expressing genuine interest in her well-being. Lena found herself torn. On one hand, she knew trusting anyone could jeopardize her mission. On the other hand, Daniel's kindness was a rare comfort in an otherwise cold and hostile environment. Slowly, cautiously, she began to let her guard down, sharing bits of her fabricated backstory while carefully avoiding anything that might reveal the truth. Whether Daniel believed her or not, Lena couldn't say. But for the first time since arriving at the palace, she felt a glimmer of hope. As days turned into weeks, Lena settled into a routine. She cleaned, she observed, and she waited. For what? She wasn't sure. But deep down, she knew that her presence here wasn't accidental. Something important was hidden within these golden walls, and it was only a matter of time before she uncovered it. Lena's days in the Imperial Palace quickly fell into a rhythm, though it was a rhythm filled with tension and uncertainty. Each morning she woke before sunrise, dressed in the simple gray robes of a servant, and joined the others in the kitchens for a quick meal of tasteless gruel. Then she would head to her assigned duties, moving silently through the grand halls while keeping her head down and her ears open. The palace was alive with secrets, and Lena was determined to uncover them. The royal chambers were her primary responsibility, and they offered plenty of opportunities to observe the inner workings of the court. She learned which nobles held the most influence by watching who sat closest to the emperor during council meetings. She noticed how certain advisors exchanged subtle glances when discussing sensitive topics, their body language betraying hidden agendas. Even the guards had patterns. Some were more vigilant than others, and Lena made a mental note of when their shifts changed. Despite her efforts to remain invisible, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It wasn't paranoia. She had trained herself to trust her instincts, and they screamed at her to stay alert. The locked chamber she'd noticed on her first day continued to intrigue her. Every night, faint energy pulses emanated from behind its heavy doors, accompanied by a low hum that vibrated through the walls. Whatever lay inside was clearly important, but accessing it seemed impossible. The chamber was guarded around the TU clock, and only high-ranking officials carried the keycards needed to unlock it. Her interactions with Daniel Cross grew more frequent as time passed. He often lingered near the areas where she worked, finding excuses to strike up conversations. At first, Lena suspected he might be testing her loyalty or trying to catch her in a lie. But Daniel never pushed too hard, instead asking casual questions about her life and sharing stories of his own. He spoke of growing up on a distant colony world, of losing his family in a border skirmish with rebels, and of joining the diplomatic corps to seek peace rather than revenge. His words painted a picture of someone burdened by guilt yet driven by idealism. Lena found herself drawn to him despite her better judgment. There was something genuine about Daniel's curiosity, something that made her want to trust him. Still, she reminded herself daily that trust could be dangerous. She kept her responses vague, weaving fragments of her fabricated backstory into their conversations. She told him she came from a farming community destroyed by drought, that she had fled to the capital seeking work, and that she hoped to save enough money to start over somewhere new. Daniel listened intently, nodding as if he believed every word. One evening, after finishing her shift, Lena decided to take a detour through a less-traveled wing of the palace. She told herself it was to scout for potential escape routes, but deep down, she knew she was looking for answers. The corridors here were dimly lit, lined with ancient tapestries and statues of long-dead Zarathian heroes. As she walked, she heard muffled voices coming from behind a partially open door. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pressed herself against the wall, straining to listen. Two advisors were arguing in hushed tones, their voices sharp with frustration. One of them mentioned the device, though neither elaborated further. Lena's pulse quickened. Was this the same device responsible for the energy pulses she'd detected? Before she could hear more, footsteps echoed down the hall, forcing her to slip away before she was spotted. Her mind raced as she returned to the servant quarters. What kind of device warranted such secrecy? And why did it seem so central to the Empire's plans? The next day brought an unexpected development. A group of rebels launched a surprise attack on the outskirts of the capital city. Explosions rocked the skyline, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the air. The palace went into lockdown immediately, with guards doubling their patrols and servants confined to their quarters. Lena used the chaos to her advantage, sneaking into restricted areas under the pretense of delivering supplies. She managed to get closer to the locked chamber than ever before, close enough to see the intricate security system guarding its entrance. It was far beyond anything she could bypass without help. During the lockdown, Daniel sought her out again. This time, his demeanor was different, more urgent, less casual. He asked if she'd heard about the attack, his eyes searching hers for any sign of recognition. Lena played dumb, shrugging and saying she didn't pay much attention to politics, but Daniel didn't let it go. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're not who you say you are," he said. Lena froze, her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, she considered running, but Daniel raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not going to turn you in," he added quickly, "but I think we can help each other." Reluctantly, Lena agreed to meet him later that night in a secluded corner of the gardens. When she arrived, Daniel explained that he had grown disillusioned with the Empire's cruelty and wanted to defect. He claimed to have access to classified information that could aid whatever cause she was working for. Lena hesitated, torn between suspicion and desperation. In the end, she decided to take the risk. They began exchanging details carefully, piecing together fragments of intelligence that hinted at a larger conspiracy. As the days passed, Lena started noticing changes in the palace's atmosphere. The advisors grew more agitated, snapping at each other during meetings and retreating to private chambers for heated discussions. The energy pulses from the locked chamber intensified, sometimes shaking the floor beneath her feet. Servants whispered rumors of an impending announcement from the Emperor, though no one knew what it entailed. Lena's sense of urgency mounted with each passing hour. Then came the breakthrough she had been waiting for. While cleaning the Emperor's private library, Lena stumbled upon a hidden compartment behind a shelf of dusty books. Her hands trembled as she reached inside, pulling out a small holographic data crystal. Knowing she couldn't examine it there, she slipped it into her robes and hurried back to her quarters. That night, under the cover of darkness, she activated the crystal using a portable projector she'd smuggled aboard the ship. What she saw stole her breath away. Maps of Earth filled the screen, marked with invasion routes and strategic targets. Detailed schematics outlined a weapon capable of collapsing entire star systems into black holes. The implications were staggering. The Zorathians weren't planning to conquer humanity. They intended to erase it completely. The device wasn't operational yet. It required a rare mineral found only in the outer rim of the galaxy. But the Empire was racing to secure the resources needed to complete it. Before Lena could fully process the enormity of the discovery, she heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled to hide the crystal. She barely managed to conceal it before the door creaked open, revealing a guard making his rounds. He glanced at her briefly, then moved on without a word. Lena exhaled slowly, her mind reeling. She now held proof of the Empire's genocidal plans, but getting it off the planet would be nearly impossible. For the first time since arriving at the palace, she allowed herself a flicker of doubt. Could she really pull this off? Or had she already gone too far to turn back? The discovery of the holographic data crystal weighed heavily on Lena's mind. Every moment felt like a ticking clock, each second bringing her closer to either success or disaster. She knew she couldn't stay in the palace forever, not with such explosive information in her possession. The Zorathians would eventually notice the missing crystal, and when they did, They wouldn't hesitate to hunt down whoever had taken it. Lena needed a plan, and fast. Her first priority was finding a way to get the crystal off the planet. The palace was a fortress, surrounded by layers of security and patrolled by soldiers who rarely slept. Even if she managed to sneak out undetected, the spaceport was miles away, guarded by checkpoints and scanners designed to detect anything unusual. Lena spent hours poring over the details of the palace layout, searching for weaknesses in its defenses. She considered every option, no matter how risky, but none seemed viable without help. That's when Daniel Cross came back into the picture. Since their meeting in the garden, he had proven himself trustworthy, at least as far as Lena could tell. He shared snippets of intelligence he gathered from diplomatic channels, hinting at growing unrest among rebel factions across the Empire. More importantly, he offered his assistance without asking for anything in return. Lena knew involving him further was dangerous, but she also knew she couldn't do this alone. Reluctantly, she decided to bring him into the fold. One night, after the palace had quieted, Lena met Daniel in the same secluded corner of the gardens where they'd spoken before. The air was cool, and the twin moons cast long shadows across the manicured grounds. Lena handed him the data crystal, explaining what she had found. Daniel's face turned pale as he scrolled through the holographic projections. "This changes everything," he whispered, his voice trembling. "If the rebels see this, they'll unite against the Empire." "Exactly," Lena replied. "But we need to get it to them first." Daniel nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "I have contacts outside the palace, people who can smuggle us out of here. But it won't be easy. We'll need to move quickly and quietly." Lena agreed, though a part of her still doubted whether trusting Daniel was the right decision. She pushed those thoughts aside. There was no time for second-guessing. Together, they began making preparations for their escape. Daniel used his position as a diplomat to gather supplies, forged travel permits, maps of the surrounding area, and a small handheld communicator capable of reaching rebel forces. Lena focused on creating diversions within the palace, spreading false rumors among the servants to distract the guards and draw attention away from their movements. Their plan was set to unfold 3 days later, during a grand banquet hosted by Emperor Cale Vorn. The event would draw nearly everyone in the palace to the main hall, leaving other areas lightly guarded. It was their best chance to slip away unnoticed. As the day approached, Lena grew increasingly anxious. Every sound made her jump. Every glance from a passing guard sent her pulse racing. She reminded herself to stay calm, to focus on the mission. Failure wasn't an option. The night of the banquet arrived, and the palace buzzed with activity. Nobles dressed in elaborate robes filed into the grand hall, their laughter echoing through the corridors. Servants scurried about, carrying trays of food and refilling glasses of sparkling wine. Lena stayed close to Daniel, pretending to assist him as he mingled with guests. When the signal came, a subtle nod from one of Daniel's contacts, they slipped away from the crowd and headed toward the service tunnels beneath the palace. The tunnels were dark and damp, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Lena followed, Daniel closely, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of grime covering the floor. They moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows whenever they passed maintenance workers or stray guards. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a hidden exit leading to the outskirts of the capital city. A hovercraft waited for them, its engines idling softly. As they climbed aboard, Lena allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They were out of the palace, but that was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be perilous, fraught with danger at every turn. Still, she felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time since arriving on the Zarathian homeworld, she had allies. She wasn't alone anymore. The hovercraft sped through the night, weaving between crumbling buildings and abandoned streets. The city was eerily quiet, its residents either trapped indoors or fleeing the chaos caused by the rebel attack earlier that week. Lena stared out the window, watching the ruins blur past. Her thoughts drifted to Earth, to the billions of lives, depending on her success. She clenched her fists, vowing silently not to let them down. After several tense hours, The hovercraft landed near a remote docking bay. A smuggler's ship awaited them, its hull battered and scarred from years of use. Daniel exchanged a few quick words with the pilot, then ushered Lena aboard. The interior of the ship was cramped and smelled faintly of oil, but Lena didn't care. She collapsed onto a bench, exhausted but unwilling to sleep. Every second mattered now. As the ship lifted off, Lena pulled out the data crystal and reviewed its contents once more. The maps and schematics confirmed her worst fears. The Zorathians were closer to completing their weapon than anyone had realized. But buried deep within the files was something else. A list of coordinates marking locations where the rare mineral needed for the device could be found. Most of these sites were in regions controlled by rebel factions, which meant humanity still had a fighting chance. Daniel joined her in the cockpit, his face etched with determination. "We're heading to meet Rachel Monroe," he said. "She's a human scientist who's been working with the rebels. If anyone can figure out how to stop this thing, it's her." Lena nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought of placing her trust in yet another stranger, but she had no choice. The stakes were too high to go it alone. As the ship hurtled through the stars, she leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. The weight of the galaxy rested on her shoulders, but she refused to give in to despair. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it head-on, for Earth, for humanity, and for the future she desperately hoped to save. The journey to meet Rachel Monroe was anything but smooth. The smuggler's ship rattled and groaned as it pushed through asteroid fields and dodged patrols from Zorathian warships. Lena sat hunched over in the cramped cabin, clutching the data crystal tightly in her hands. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed, even though Daniel assured her the pilot knew what he was doing. Every flash of light outside the viewport made her heart race, and every sudden jolt of the ship sent her mind spiraling with worst-case scenarios. Daniel tried to keep her calm, offering quiet reassurances whenever he noticed her tension. "We're almost there," he said one night as they navigated a particularly dense cluster of debris. "Rachel's base is hidden deep in rebel territory. The Zorathians won't find us." Lena nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Trust didn't come easily to her, not after months of living a double life in the Imperial Palace. But she forced herself to focus on the mission. They had the evidence needed to expose the Empire's plans, and now they just had to deliver it to someone who could act on it. That someone was Rachel Monroe. When they finally arrived at the rebel base, it was nothing like Lena had imagined. Instead of a fortified stronghold, the facility was tucked inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its entrance concealed by layers of rock and advanced camouflage technology. The interior was dimly lit, with exposed wires snaking along the walls and makeshift furniture scattered about. It looked more like a refuge for survivors than a command center for revolutionaries. Rachel Monroe greeted them personally. She was a wiry woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and short gray hair streaked with silver. Her eyes were intense, scanning Lena and Daniel as if trying to read their intentions. Despite her no-nonsense demeanor, there was a warmth to her voice when she spoke. "You must be the ones Daniel told me about," she said, extending a hand. "I've heard good things." Lena hesitated before shaking her hand. She wasn't used to people knowing about her or trusting her so quickly, but Rachel seemed genuine, and time was running out. Without wasting another moment, Lena handed over the data crystal. "This is everything we have," she said. "It shows what the Zorathians are planning and where they're getting their resources to build their weapon." Rachel took the crystal and inserted it into a portable console. As the holographic projections flickered to life, her expression darkened. She studied the maps and schematics carefully, occasionally muttering under her breath. When she finished, she turned back to Lena and Daniel. "This is worse than I thought," she admitted. "If they complete this device, they'll destroy entire star systems, including Earth." "But it's not operational yet, right?" Daniel asked, his voice tinged with urgency. "There's still time to stop them?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes, but barely. They need a rare mineral called Zorithium to power the core. Most of the deposits are in contested regions, which means we can disrupt their supply lines, if we move fast. What do you need from us? Lena asked, leaning forward. Rachel glanced at her, then at Daniel. Your intel gives us a starting point, but we'll need someone on the ground to guide the operation. Someone who knows how the Zorathians think, and who isn't afraid to take risks. Lena exchanged a glance with Daniel. Neither of them had expected to stay involved once they delivered the crystal, but neither of them hesitated either. We're in, Lena said firmly. Over the next few days, they worked closely with Rachel and her team to devise a plan. The rebels would launch simultaneous strikes on key mining operations, cutting off the flow of Zorithium to the Empire. Meanwhile, Lena and Daniel would infiltrate the central processing facility where the mineral was refined, planting explosives to cripple production permanently. It was a dangerous mission, but it was also their best shot at stopping the Zorathians. The day of the operation arrived too soon. Lena and Daniel suited up in stolen uniforms, disguising themselves as workers assigned to the facility. Their shuttle landed without incident, blending in with the steady stream of transports bringing supplies and personnel to the site. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the hum of machinery. Workers moved mechanically, their faces obscured by helmets and masks. Lena kept her head down, mimicking their movements as they made their way deeper into the complex. Their target was the main refinery chamber, a massive room filled with towering tanks and conveyor belts. Explosives had been hidden in their gear, disguised as tools or spare parts. While Daniel distracted a group of technicians with fabricated questions about equipment malfunctions, Lena slipped away to plant the charges. Her hands trembled as she attached the devices to critical support beams, setting timers to ensure they'd have enough time to escape. Just as she finished, alarms blared throughout the facility. A guard shouted something in Zorathian, and suddenly, the room erupted into chaos. Lena cursed under her breath. They'd been spotted. Grabbing Daniel by the arm, she pulled him toward the nearest exit. Shots rang out behind them, ricocheting off metal walls as they sprinted through narrow corridors. The sound of pursuit grew louder, forcing them to duck into a maintenance tunnel. We can't go back the way we came, Daniel panted, glancing over his shoulder. They'll be waiting for us. There's an emergency hatch near here, Lena replied, consulting a map on her wristband. If we can reach it, we might stand a chance. They pushed forward, their lungs burning and their legs aching. The hatch was exactly where the map said it would be, a circular door embedded in the ceiling, accessible only by climbing a ladder. Lena went first, hoisting herself up and prying the hatch open just wide enough for them to slip through. They emerged onto the surface of the asteroid, the harsh glare of nearby stars illuminating the barren landscape. In the distance, they could see the rebel fleet engaging Zorathian forces in a fierce battle. Ships exchanged fire, explosions lighting up the void like fireworks. Lena and Daniel ran toward a waiting transport vessel, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. Just as they reached the ramp, a blast from an enemy fighter rocked the ground beneath their feet. Lena stumbled, catching herself on Daniel's arm. Keep moving, he urged, pulling her forward. They collapsed inside the ship moments before, the hatch sealed shut. The pilot wasted no time taking off, weaving through the chaos as the refinery exploded behind them. Flames engulfed the facility, sending shockwaves rippling through space. Lena watched it all unfold through a viewport, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. They had done it. They had destroyed the refinery and crippled the Zorathians' ability to produce Zorithium. But the victory was bittersweet. As the transport joined the rebel fleet, Lena leaned back in her seat, exhaustion washing over her. She knew this was only the beginning. The Zorathians wouldn't give up easily, and the fight ahead would be long and brutal. Still, for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. They had struck a blow against the Empire, proving that even the smallest acts of resistance could change the course of history. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, Lena closed her eyes and let herself rest. There would be more battles to fight, more sacrifices to make. But for now, she allowed herself to believe that humanity still had a future worth fighting for. The destruction of the Zorithium refinery sent shockwaves through the Zorathian Empire. News of the attack spread quickly, igniting outrage among the nobles and panic within the military ranks. For the first time in decades, the Empire's iron grip on its territories began to weaken. Rebel factions seized the opportunity, launching coordinated assaults on key installations and supply lines. The galaxy was no longer a stage for one-sided dominance. It had become a battleground. Lena, Daniel, and Rachel returned to the rebel base aboard the transport ship, greeted as heroes by those who understood the magnitude of what they had accomplished. But Lena didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired, exhausted even. The weight of everything she had endured pressed down on her, and though the mission had been a success, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a small step in a much larger war. Still, she forced herself to stay focused. There was too much at stake to rest now. Rachel wasted no time rallying the rebels. Using the intelligence provided by Lena and Daniel, she mapped out new strategies to exploit the Empire's vulnerabilities. The loss of the refinery had thrown the Zorathians into disarray, but they were already scrambling to recover. Scouts reported increased activity near the remaining Zorithium deposits, suggesting the Empire was desperate to secure alternative sources. If the rebels didn't act quickly, the Zorathians would regain their footing, and humanity's fragile hope would be extinguished. "We need to hit them where it hurts most," Rachel said during a strategy meeting. "Their capital city, their palace." Lena's stomach churned at the thought. Returning to the Imperial Palace felt like tempting fate. But she knew Rachel was right. The palace wasn't just the seat of power, it was the heart of the Empire's operations. Destroying it would deal a devastating blow to morale and cripple their ability to coordinate further attacks. It was risky, nearly suicidal, but it might be the only way to turn the tide. Daniel agreed to join the mission, refusing to let Lena face the danger alone. Together, they volunteered to lead a team tasked with infiltrating the palace and planting explosives deep within its core. The plan was simple yet perilous. Disguise themselves as workers repairing damage from earlier rebel raids, gain access to restricted areas, and set charges in critical locations. They would have mere minutes to escape before the entire structure collapsed. The night before the operation, Lena sat alone in her quarters, staring at the data crystal that had started it all. So much had changed since she'd first uncovered its secrets. She thought about Earth, about the billions of lives hanging in the balance. She thought about Daniel, who had risked everything to stand by her side. And she thought about herself, the person she had been before this mission, and the person she had become. She wasn't sure if she could ever go back to the life she once knew, but she didn't care. This fight had given her purpose. The next morning, the team assembled in the hangar bay. Each member carried forged identification papers and wore uniforms, stolen from captured Zorathian soldiers. Lena checked her gear one last time, ensuring every detail was perfect. When Rachel approached her, she placed a hand on Lena's shoulder. "You've done more than anyone could have asked of you," she said softly. "Whatever happens today, know that you've changed the course of history." Lena nodded, swallowing hard. Then she turned and boarded the shuttle alongside Daniel and the others. The journey to the Zorathian homeworld was tense, every second stretching endlessly. As they descended through the atmosphere, Lena gripped the armrests of her seat, bracing for what lay ahead. The palace loomed before them, its golden spires gleaming under the twin suns. It looked exactly as she remembered, beautiful, imposing, and deadly. They landed without incident, blending in with the steady flow of repair crews entering the palace grounds. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Guards patrolled the halls more aggressively than usual, their weapons drawn and ready. Lena kept her head down, speaking only when necessary, and sticking close to Daniel. Their cover story held up under scrutiny, allowing them to move deeper into the complex. The team split up to maximize efficiency, each pair heading to a different target location. Lena and Daniel made their way to the central power core, a massive chamber filled with humming machinery and pulsating energy conduits. Planting the explosives required precision and speed. Lena worked methodically, attaching charges to key structural supports while Daniel kept watch. Every sound outside the door made her flinch, but she forced herself to stay calm. One mistake, and it would all be over. Just as they finished setting the final charge, alarms blared throughout the palace. A guard shouted something in Zarathian, his voice sharp with alarm. Lena's blood ran cold. They'd been discovered. Grabbing Daniel's arm, she sprinted toward the nearest exit, dodging blasts from pursuing soldiers. The corridors blurred together as they ran, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, explosions began rocking the palace as secondary charges detonated, sealing off escape routes and sowing chaos. They reached the rendezvous point moments before the main blast went off. The ground shook violently, sending debris raining down around them. Lena shielded her face with her arms, pulling Daniel behind a crumbling pillar for cover. Through the smoke and dust, she saw the rebel extraction team waiting nearby, their ship hovering just above the surface. With one final burst of effort, they dashed toward it, leaping aboard as the hatch closed behind them. As the ship ascended, Lena turned to look back at the palace. Flames engulfed the structure, consuming it in a fiery inferno. The sight filled her with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. Countless lives had been lost in the pursuit of power, but perhaps now there was a chance for peace, for justice. Back at the rebel base, celebrations erupted. Soldiers cheered, embracing one another as news of the palace's destruction spread. Lena stood apart from the crowd, watching silently as the galaxy began to change before her eyes. Earth's leaders, emboldened by the rebels' success, announced plans to unite with other oppressed species in a coalition against the Zorathians. Humanity, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had proven itself capable of greatness. Daniel found her later, standing alone on a balcony overlooking the stars. He joined her without saying a word, simply offering his presence as support. After a long silence, he spoke. "What happens now?" Lena smiled faintly. "Now we rebuild. We fight for a future where no one has to live in fear." The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Lena gazed up at the endless expanse of space, knowing that her actions, along with those of countless others, had sparked a revolution. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would she.